Society has a problem with people who aren't constantly driven. The self-help industry generates billions selling the idea that motivation should be endless, that productivity defines worth, and that feeling unmotivated means something's broken. But what if that's completely backwards? What if the periods of feeling unmotivated aren't signs of depression, laziness, or failure, but instead are the brain functioning exactly as designed? The motivation myth. Walk into any bookstore and the shelves overflow with titles promising to unlock unlimited motivation or end procrastination forever. Scroll through social media and the message is relentless. Rise and grind. Hustle culture. No days off, sleep when you're dead. The underlying assumption? Constant motivation is the natural state. Anything less is pathology requiring correction. But evolutionary psychology tells a radically different story. For hundreds of thousands of years, human ancestors lived in environments where resources were scarce and energy conservation was survival. The brain evolved exquisite mechanisms for regulating effort expenditure. Motivation wasn't meant to be constant, it was meant to be strategic. Early humans didn't hunt every day. They didn't gather every moment. They worked intensely when necessary, then recovered. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies reveal something fascinating. People work roughly 15 to 20 hours per week on survival activities. The rest of the time? Social connection, rest, play, storytelling. Modern culture has taken a brain designed for episodic effort and demanded constant output, then labeled the inevitable exhaustion as personal failure. The neuroscience of rest. When motivation drops, something crucial is happening in the brain. Neuroscience reveals that periods of low motivation trigger what researchers call the default mode network, a constellation of brain regions that activate during rest and mind wandering. For decades, scientists dismissed this network as the brain doing nothing, but research has revealed it's doing something essential: consolidation, integration, and maintenance. During these unmotivated periods, the brain processes and consolidates memories. The hippocampus needs downtime to transfer information to long-term storage. The default mode network connects distant brain regions, allowing the synthesis of information that conscious, focused thinking can't achieve. This is where insight emerges. The prefrontal cortex needs recovery time to maintain executive function. Constant motivation depletes the neurochemicals, particularly dopamine, that enable self-control and decision-making. Brain imaging studies show that people who never allow themselves rest periods actually show decreased gray matter density in regions associated with attention and emotional regulation. Constant motivation isn't sustainable, it's neurotoxic. Dopamine depletion. Motivation isn't a character trait, it's a neurochemical state. And the primary chemical involved is dopamine, the brain's motivation and reward molecule. Here's the crucial thing about dopamine. It's finite. The brain can't produce unlimited quantities. When dopamine-producing neurons fire constantly, they deplete their stores faster than the brain can synthesize new dopamine. Research distinguishes between wanting, motivation, and liking, pleasure. Both require dopamine, but motivation requires sustained dopamine signaling. When those circuits are overused, they become less sensitive, a process called downregulation. This is why the most motivated people often hit walls of complete apathy. Their dopamine systems are temporarily exhausted. Studies on chronic stress and overwork show measurable changes in dopamine receptor density. The brain literally adapts to constant stimulation by becoming less responsive to it. Sleep deprivation compounds this. Dopamine neurons are particularly vulnerable to inadequate sleep. Even one night of poor sleep reduces dopamine receptor availability by up to 20%. Feeling unmotivated after a period of intense drive isn't dysfunction. It's the brain demanding recovery time to restore neurochemical balance. The wisdom of resistance. Sometimes lack of motivation isn't about depletion, it's about direction. The brain has sophisticated unconscious detection systems that process far more information than conscious awareness can handle. When motivation consistently fails to materialize around a particular goal or activity, it might be the unconscious brain signaling misalignment. Psychologist Carl Jung wrote about the wisdom of the unconscious, the idea that beneath conscious goals and socially conditioned desires, there's a deeper knowing about what actually matters. Lack of motivation can be that deeper wisdom asserting itself. Research reveals that people often confuse socially approved goals with personally meaningful ones. Someone might consciously believe they want a high-powered career because that's what success looks like in their culture. But if the unconscious self knows that path leads away from core values, connection, creativity, autonomy, motivation will sabotage the pursuit. This isn't self-sabotage in the pathological sense. It's the integrated self refusing to invest energy in a goal that conscious mind selected but whole person rejects. The body also participates in this signaling. Research shows that when people pursue goals misaligned with their values, stress markers increase, elevated cortisol, increased inflammation, reduced immune function. The body is literally rejecting the direction. Lack of motivation can be the wisest response to a fundamentally wrong path. The cycles of human functioning. Human bodies don't operate on straight lines. They operate on cycles, some lasting 90 minutes, others lasting seasons. Chronobiology, the study of biological rhythms, reveals that motivation and energy fluctuate according to multiple overlapping cycles that are completely normal. Ultradian rhythms are 90 to 120-minute cycles of alertness and energy that repeat throughout the day. These rhythms mean the brain naturally moves through peaks and valleys every 2 hours. During the peak, focus and motivation are high. During the valley, they drop, not because something's wrong, but because the rhythm demands it. Circadian rhythms create daily patterns. Most people experience peak cognitive function in mid-morning and late afternoon, with a pronounced dip in early afternoon. That post-lunch slump isn't laziness, it's the circadian system signaling rest. Seasonal rhythms affect humans more than modern culture acknowledges. Studies show that even people without clinical seasonal affective disorder experience motivational changes across seasons. Winter brings reduced dopamine production, earlier melatonin release, and decreased energy, all neurobiological adaptations to shorter days. Historical evidence shows that human societies traditionally had seasonal patterns of activity, intense work during harvest, relative rest during winter. Modern culture demands identical productivity year-round, then pathologizes the biological resistance. The mental health paradox. Clinical psychology distinguishes between pathological lack of motivation, anhedonia, a core symptom of depression, and healthy periods of low motivation. Understanding the difference is crucial. Anhedonia involves the inability to experience pleasure or interest in anything, including previously enjoyed activities. It's pervasive, persistent, and accompanied by other symptoms: hopelessness, worthlessness, disrupted sleep, and appetite. This requires clinical intervention. Healthy low motivation is context-specific and temporary. Activities that genuinely matter still hold interest. There's still capacity for pleasure, connection, and meaning, just not constant drive to produce and achieve. Psychologist Abraham Maslow's work on self-actualization distinguished between growth-motivated versus deficiency-motivated behavior. Deficiency motivation, driven by anxiety, insecurity, or external pressure, requires constant vigilance because it's compensating for perceived lack. Growth motivation, by contrast, ebbs and flows naturally because it's not compensating for anything. When basic needs are met and self-worth is secure, motivation becomes responsive rather than compulsive. Paradoxically, people with secure mental health often feel less motivated in the hustler culture sense because they're not driven by fear, inadequacy, or the need to prove themselves. The compulsive need to always feel motivated, always be productive, always be on, that's often the real mental health concern. It suggests anxiety-driven functioning, not healthy engagement with life. Reclaiming rest. Understanding that unmotivated periods can indicate health rather than pathology requires a fundamental reframe of how productivity and worth are connected. First, decouple productivity from worth. This is psychological work that culture actively resists. Capitalism requires people to believe their value comes from output. But human worth is inherent, not earned through achievement. Research on self-compassion shows that people who base self-worth on performance experience higher anxiety, depression, and fear of failure. Those who maintain unconditional self-acceptance show greater resilience and, paradoxically, often achieve more because they're not paralyzed by fear. Second, recognize that boredom is productive. Neuroscience research shows that boredom activates brain networks involved in creativity and future planning. The feeling of being unmotivated and slightly bored often precedes breakthrough insights. When people compulsively fill every moment with stimulation, scrolling, working, consuming content, they never access these states. The constant feeling that something's missing isn't a motivation problem. It's an overstimulation problem. Third, trust cyclical engagement. Nature operates in cycles, seasons, tides, day and night. Human motivation that respects these natural rhythms looks like intense periods of engagement followed by recovery. Athletes call this periodization, planned cycles of training intensity and rest. Knowledge workers need the same. The people who sustain long-term excellence don't maintain constant motivation. They honor the cycles. The productivity gospel has convinced millions that feeling unmotivated is a problem requiring solutions: better morning routines, more discipline, optimized supplements, mindset shifts. But psychology and neuroscience tell a different story. They reveal that periods of low motivation are often the brain and body functioning with sophisticated wisdom, recovering neurochemical balance, consolidating learning, signaling misalignment, or simply honoring natural rhythms. The real pathology isn't the occasional lack of motivation. It's the cultural demand for constant drive that ignores biological limits, dismisses cyclical functioning, and equates human worth with economic output. Mental health includes the capacity to rest without guilt, to trust that motivation will return when the system is ready, to recognize that a life of depth and meaning requires periods of apparent dormancy, where roots deepen even when nothing visible grows. Feeling unmotivated doesn't always mean something's broken. Sometimes it means everything's working exactly as it should, and the healthiest response is simply to listen.